The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Mintz intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor, he skips into the lane, puts up a floater, it drops in.
Let's get it started with your hosts, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Syracuse played against the big boys on Saturday and got smoked. Back on Red is the New Orange. Feels like we might be saying this a lot down the stretch of the ACC season. Ian Unsworth, Johnny Gadamowitz with you for another recap and another preview. Notre Dame coming up Saturday. This one at the Dome. It's a rematch of the first game in December, which the Orange narrowly lost 69-64. But Johnny, first and foremost, the 24-point shellacking at the hands of the Louisville Cardinals, who came to the 315 and properly dismantled Syracuse on both ends of the floor. 43 points at halftime for the Cards, who, as we talked about, are still missing some key pieces due to injury. They didn't skip a beat.
They didn't skip a beat at all, Ian, and it felt like that two-game mini winning streak was almost too good to be true, right? This was a game going into it from a Syracuse standpoint that you didn't even need to win. You just needed to hang, and you needed to prove that these last two games were not just a blip on the radar, but something that you could point to, and something that you can build on, and something that come early March, we could go back as a turning point and say, oh yeah, remember when conference play started in the middle of January, when they rattled off a couple of wins, they hung with Louisville, but no, this was the opposite. And to be quite honest and a little blunt here, it really is a sad state of affairs. I mean, you think about how the Dome used to be a place that was almost feared, right? Going up there, braving the elements, the snowy Syracuse Januaries. You're lucky if you were getting out of there with a win. And for Syracuse to hit the halftime break against, let's give Louisville their flowers too, a really talented Cardinals team. But for this game to be over before the halftime horn even sounds, it's frustrating to say the least.
Well, on the Louisville side of things, Pat Kelsey drew up a great game plan. In the first half alone, 8 made three-pointers. Chucky Hepburn had 5 of them. And we talked about his work on the have to handle the ball a lot, right? That was the first thing we touched on when it came to Louisville. Chucky Hepburn is in his first year of being a true point guard. He orchestrated the pick and roll perfectly in that first half. Syracuse got pick and rolled to death. And we talked about this when they played the first 5 games of the season against Lemoyne and Youngstown State and Colgate about how the Orange had trouble guarding the pick and roll. And now against players that are really talented and experienced playing at a high level, I think SU got the scouting report wrong. Look, Chucky Hepburn's not a fantastic three-point shooter, but you keep going under screens. He hits the first one. You have to adjust. Hepburn ended up with 24. He was 6 of 10 from the three-point arc. And if you had to point to someone on the Louisville squad who you would have bet on to go off from 3, it wouldn't have been Chucky. But it was Chucky, and Syracuse never figured it out. Hepburn also, even when Syracuse went under screens, gave him space, still found ways to get into the paint, still found ways to get James Scott and Devon Hadley involved. 13 offensively.
I think what's frustrating for me is, and they were talking about this on the broadcast to an extent, these were two teams that were really new, right? Like essentially kind of built from scratch in the transfers and, just a new look roster and meshing and building chemistry that in a way, Ian, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, this Louisville team almost kind of represented that idea of what could have been, right? Pat Kelsey laid out the model for going out there, finding talent, recognizing that talent, bringing them to campus, and then getting the most out of said talent. And I think with Syracuse, I don't know if it's I flip flop back and forth if it's a personnel problem or if it's just just a talent problem of, look, they were better than us, hand up. It's probably a mixture of the two, but I think that's my takeaway from this game. Look, college basketball has shown us numerous teams over the past couple of years that, yes, okay, are the deep March teams likely to be veteran groups that have gone to battle and gone to war together? Yes. But there's a way to do it when you kind of have this hodgepodge piecing it together. Everybody's doing their fourth year after a couple different stops at, various programs. And Louisville has really embodied that, and they've been rewarded for it. Now, 6-1 in the ACC, and they just made, again, to my point from earlier, what used to be a really tough road victory to get kind of look like a piece of cake.
The Dome had way too many green towels sitting on seats. Bar none at this point. I think we can both agree that the crowds in the JMA Wireless Dome are disappointing at that. And you don't get to see much of the student section because they're stuck behind a basket, but I can guarantee you that place wasn't full either, especially for a mid-afternoon game on a Saturday. People can do better. That's straight up. But at the same time, when there's not a lot of hope, when there's not a lot of hope and almost zero expectation at this point that Syracuse has any chance to go further than the ACC tournament, it is hard to blame them. To your other point, Johnny, about building a roster and putting the pieces together with a first-year brand new head coach. This is something we also talked about last weekend. Think about Louisville's supporter base and the amount of money that Cardinals fans are willing to throw behind basketball. The amount of money that the administration is willing to throw behind basketball. I mean, as much as I love to clown the KFC Yum Center for being the most ridiculously named arena in college basketball, that place stands up to any NBA facility in the country. That place is on par with NBA arenas. That's how nice it is. The administration knows that basketball is its ticket. The fans love their Cardinals, and there's a ton of money behind this program. That's why when you bring in a Pat Kelsey, who's a proven winner at College of Charleston, he can go get these dudes from other major programs. He can get the Sun Belt Player of the Year. He can get Wisconsin's starting point guard. Those things aren't that difficult. But for Adrian Autry, he can't bring guys with him. He didn't have the choice of, hey, let me bring my old experienced roster to Syracuse with me and keep my same system going. We were all clamoring for, a different direction from Jim Boeheim. We all wanted to see something different. We wanted Red to deviate from the zone and play faster and do all this sort of stuff. So he has to find his own style and do it with the players that Jim Boeheim recruited. Also keep this in mind. Over the offseason, Syracuse hired a general manager, right? Alex Klein, who's been in the NBA, who knows player personnel backwards and forwards. And now it's the first year that Syracuse has someone else employed to manage the transfer portal, to manage NIL funding, to handle all of the other crap. So all Red Autry has to do is worry about coaching. That's great within itself, but it means that Red Autry and the coaching staff had to put this year's roster, the 2024-25 Syracuse team, together with no help. Best believe Louisville, and think about these other teams that are successful this year in the same way. Mark Pope at Kentucky. I mean, there are Kentucky. Calipari did the same thing at Arkansas. They're not even good. They are not even a good team. They are going to be in the bottom half of the SEC. It's not working there. But it's Calipari, so people are like, all right, whatever. Rick Barnes is doing it at Tennessee. He's been there forever. He's been in college basketball for forever. But again, people in Tennessee love their balls, and they throw a ton of money behind it. UCLA, same sort of thing. There is money there. And I just don't think Syracuse has the NIL resources right now to get top echelon players from the portal and put it all together that way. So the fact that Coach Autry continues to be successful in high school recruiting and continues to get guys that are high 4 stars, 5 stars is a credit to his persistence, and also a credit that high school kids haven't given up on the program. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. Last thing. People were comparing Red Autry, or at least there are rumblings out there that Red Autry and Kenny Payne are on the same level. Stop that. Stop that.
It's not that
That's
bad.
ridiculous. Syracuse won 20 games last year, right? Yes, they went down in flames. It doesn't look great this year. But by goodness, Kenny Payne lost to a D2 school in an exhibition game. All right? Let's stop.
Clear difference.
And now, reminder to follow us on Twitter at F68_Qs.
Yeah, I like that tangent. I like that tangent of yours, Ian. I think if there is one number that I look at that kind of puts a bow on this game, it's the fact that J.J. Starling had more turnovers than points. He had 6 turnovers to 4 points. And just to piggyback off your point from earlier with the high school.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Johnny.
Recruits.
They played a game last weekend.
Yeah, they did. They did, yes.
They played a game last weekend. I kind of lost that in the shuffle here.
Sadiq White can't get here soon enough. Great piece by Donna DeTota of Syracuse.com about his desire and his excitement to come here. And obviously you couple that with Kiyan Anthony, and we can only hope that next year's recruiting class, combined with the promise of Donnie Freeman and a year under his belt, kind of turns the tide, because I saw, I forget exactly where I saw it, but there was something floating the Twitterverse or the Xverse or whatever you want to call it, that this year's graduating class, Ian, is the first, and I'm not even talking basketball, like Syracuse University graduating class will have been the first Syracuse graduating class to go their entire collegiate careers without seeing an NCAA tournament berth in something like over 50 years, I think it was. I mean, it is really astounding how the expectations and results have really kind of just turned on its head. And to your point, a lot of it's NIL, a lot of it's portal. It's not that Syracuse can't get there. It's just that right now they appear to be kind of stuck in this no man's land where the direction isn't entirely quite clear. But hey, they've got the Irish coming up this weekend, so maybe things will turn around for the better.
Yeah, the high school recruiting thing, I think, is the most important point, right? The portal will hit and miss every single year for every single team. Money for that don't do anything. There will be guys you get in the portal who are kind of underlooked, undervalued. Maybe they come from D2. Heck, maybe it's even a junior college guy. Like Dalton Connect was a junior college guy who played D2 basketball, then went to Tennessee and went nuts and was the best player in the country that wasn't 7'4", or however tall Zach Edey is. But you get my point. There are gems everywhere in college basketball. It's not necessarily we need to pay the most money for the best guys from these top D1 programs. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just scratching the rough a bit more to find the diamonds. And we move on. No more Louisville. I don't think there's much more to say about that game. It's over. That's what we can say about it. Next up for Syracuse, a 4:00 tip against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the JMA Dome. The Orange, again, as they've been many times this year, are on ACC Network. The one difference between the Notre Dame of December and the Notre Dame of mid-January is their leading scorers back. Marcus Burton, sophomore from Indiana, has been back with a vengeance. He's played in 4 games since returning from injury, and he scored at least 15 in all 4. Came back with 23 points against North Carolina. And, Johnny, I think Burton changes Notre Dame's dynamic really for the better.
Absolutely. I mean, this guy is a dynamic playmaker on both ends of the court. The counter to it is the fact that if you remember the last time these two teams played, Syracuse was down its leading scorer too, when obviously they didn't have J.J. Starling, who again,
Yep.
let's remind our listeners, a Notre Dame transfer coming off a really crappy game against Louisville, no other way to put it, is going to have a fire lit underneath him to come out and make a statement. For me, the priority is containing Braden Shrewsbury. He shot the lights out in that game. I think it was something like 6 of 10 or 7 of 11 from 3. The exact number is escaping me, but it was just 3 after 3 after 3.
6 of 11. I got the box
Because
score
the
up.
Orange were not closing out on shooters, and Shrewsbury really reaped the benefits because of it. The other thing I'm keeping an eye on is who is going to step up offensively. Outside of Jyare Davis and Donnie Freeman, nobody scored in double figures the last time that Syracuse played the Irish. They were able to kind of establish a defensive game plan, and to their credit, really execute it. Now J.J. Starling back in the fold, obviously that adds a wrinkle in Notre Dame's defensive game plan. But look, as far as I'm concerned, Ian, this is a game you lost by 5 last time. I know Marcus Burton is back, but so is J.J. Starling. Syracuse needs this game. They're on home court. No reason they can't come out and execute.
Yeah, here's another interesting number from this game against Notre Dame. 40 of Syracuse's 64 points came in the paint. Eddie Lampkin had 5 points in that game. So it was a lot of Donnie Freeman, who, again, we still don't know if he's going to play. It doesn't seem like anything has been, there hasn't been much progress. Like when Starling was out, we heard, all right, the hand's getting better. It's going to be 4 weeks. Hand's getting better. It's going to be 2 weeks. Right now, we haven't heard much about Donnie Freeman yet, other than he's out. And, leg stuff is much trickier than a broken hand, especially if it's we don't know what it is, but if it's a sprain, if it's a ligament, like those sort of things are very touchy. So the jury's still out on what Donnie Freeman's status is. But it should be a positive that Jyare Davis had a really good game last time, 20 points, 8 of 12 from the field, got to the free throw line as well. And hopefully Starling can take some of the pressure off Jaquan Carlos to distribute. Because this was really Carlos's first good game against a Power 5 team, if I remember correctly. He had 8 points, 7 assists, really started to look comfortable running the offense, moving the ball. So hopefully he can find his groove again, even if he is coming off the bench, and really run the offense and get things moving for Syracuse.
And you hope that the Orange are up to the task defensively, too. Notre Dame turned it over 15 times in the last game against the Qs, so it's no secret that they're going to need to have to execute on both ends if they do want to defend home court and walk out with a victory. I think the Donnie Freeman thing is really interesting because I think this Louisville game is a prime example of it. I know he's a freshman. He's a difference maker. Even in games where he's not at his best, where it's an off night for Freeman and maybe he's held to single-digit points, just his presence alone is so altering, particularly on the defensive end too, that when you have him out there, he just unlocks so much more what you're capable of on both ends. And I'm not advocating for him to be rushed back. He's a freshman. He's got a bright future. They're going to do their due diligence with making sure he's healthy and ready to go. But at the same token, I do wonder if there is some extra sense of urgency just to get him out there, even if he's at, say, 75, 80%, because of what he allows you to do and how much more kind of one-dimensional you become when you don't have the luxury of his services available.
Yeah, and Freeman is necessary because Tay Davis had a good game against Syracuse last time out, and it was mainly driving. Keba and Jai as well can get pretty busy on the offensive glass, so need the help inside where you can get it. And Freeman certainly is a pivotal piece of rebounding the basketball as well as scoring it. 11 rebounds, all on the defensive end last time against the Fighting Irish. Notre Dame snapped a 4-game losing streak with a 78-60 win over BC on Monday. We'll see if Syracuse can right the ship against an Irish team that's 8-9 on the season. Only conference win for the Golden Domers is against the Orange back in early December. Reminder to give us a follow, F68_Cuse on Twitter. Check out the Field of 68 podcast network for all your college basketball needs, whether you're a big-time program, Kansas, Kentucky, if you're a fan of the Blue Bloods, or if you're a fan of the mid-major schools, all the way down to the MEAC, the SWAC, we got you covered here on the Field of 68. So for Johnny, Ian, signing off. Have a good weekend, and go